Good morning, everybody. This is Noah, one of the educators with Shortcuts, and today we're going to be looking at Anywhere, which is the ability for you and your staff to look at your appointments on your online devices, so your phone or your tablet. So in case you're at the salon or at the shop or you're at home and you just want to see what your appointments look like this week, this is what Anywhere is from Shortcuts. So we're going to learn the basics today. So let's go ahead and jump into the presentation. So similar to other classroom sessions, we are recording. This one's going to be 30 minutes, probably a little less today. My microphone is on. We are recording. We will share a copy of this recording with everybody later. And if you have any questions, we'll of course allow a few minutes at the end to take any questions. But if you have any follow-up questions, or if you're watching this video after the fact, you can always reach out to us on our social media pages, on Facebook, on Instagram, at Shortcuts USA. So let's jump into it. So in the past few weeks, we've been looking at a number of different online services available through Shortcuts, specifically through the console. Today, we're going to focus on Anywhere. And again, what it is the ability to look at your appointments for the week, or for the staff to look at their appointments for the week. We're going to show you how to add staff members, how to add employees so that they can look at their schedules, how to understand the different permission levels, because maybe you only want your staff to look at the appointments for themselves, not necessarily to make appointments for themselves or to make appointments for other staff members. So it's important that you understand the different permission levels. And of course, how do you access Anywhere? How do you go to it? How do you find the page? So what it is, if you go to the Shortcuts online console, and again, this is something that we've looked at over the past few weeks, you should hopefully be somewhat familiar with it. This is the page that you go to whenever you need to set up online booking for your salon or your shop, or self check-in for your salon or your shop. If you're setting out spotlight surveys, so taking a survey of the customers, this is where you go to review them, to read them, to reply to them. One of the options that you have in here is called Anywhere. Now, the console looks a little bit different if you're on a mobile device versus on a computer. Since we're streaming from a computer, we're going to be looking at the web, the regular computer browser version. Normally, when you log into the console on a mobile device, by default, when you log in with your username and password, you automatically go into Anywhere, which is your schedules. But if you're on the computer, if you're on a web browser, there's an actual Anywhere button, and it looks like a little person lounging on a beach chair. So the web page that you would go to access this is console.shortcutsoftware.com. And then once you're there, you'll log in with your username and password. Your username is usually your email address. So for your staff, you'll want to collect their email addresses if you want to give them permission. So make sure everybody has an email, and then we're going to talk about how to give them access. So if you wanted to add somebody into Anywhere, now you as an administrator or you as a manager that's sitting in on this presentation, you probably already know your own username and password. But if you wanted to give your staff access to look at their appointments, you're going to log into the console and go into Site Settings. And once you're in Site Settings, on the right side, there's a button, there's a tab that says Manage Users. So when you press Manage Users, you're going to choose the button that says Add a New User. So those are the first three steps. Now you probably remember the Site Settings. This is where you go to update your business's social media links. So if you're sending out emails using the cloud, this is where you go to put in your Facebook, your Instagram, your Twitter, and of course your company website, in addition to your phone number, in addition to your actual physical address. So Site Settings, Manage Users, Add a New User. Now, once you're in Add a New User, you actually have two different options. Create a user that is not associated with a point of sale employee, or the second option, create a user that is a point of sale employee. You'll always want to choose the second option. because we want to connect to Shortcuts, look at your staff list, and have you choose which employee should have permission. Now, what does the first button represent? If you have a business partner and they're not necessarily in your Shortcut system, so they're neither cutting hair or performing any services, this is a business partner that runs the books or looks at reports, and you just want them to be able to access the console, look at schedules, and perhaps reply to customers, that's when you would choose the first option. But for the majority of you, the people that are sitting in on this presentation, you're going to choose the second option, and then you're going to choose which salon you'd like to set it up for. So if you have multiple locations, you can set them up one at a time. So in this case, we'll set up Angel Salon or My Salon, and then you choose which staff member. Once you choose the staff member, there's 3 things you want to make sure are filled in. Their email, which becomes the staff login, and you make sure they have a first name and a last name. Now, everything we're looking at, we will review in real time on the actual console, so you don't have to memorize these steps. So once you make sure you have the email address entered for the staff member, you make sure you have their first name and last name, at the bottom of the window is where you choose their level of permission. Now, for the majority of sites that use Shortcuts, they usually only give the staff 2 sets of permissions. The first one is the checkbox that says employee. And if you give a staff member employee access, then that means the only thing they can do when they log into the console is go directly to Anywhere and look at their appointments. And they can only see their own appointments. They can't see anybody else's. But if they should also be able to make appointments using their phone or using a tablet from the console, then you give them a second checkbox, and that permission is appointment operator. So for the majority of people that use Shortcuts that give their staff permissions, it's employee and appointment operator. Once you press the Save button on the top right corner, the staff member is actually going to get an email, and it'll say, welcome to the console. This is your username. This is your password. It'll be a random password. And then once they log in, they can look at their appointment book. So let's jump back and let's do this in real time. So we're going to jump into the console. So again, most of you should be familiar with this. This is where you set up your Book Me settings, your online booking settings, Spotlight for survey, My Local Salon if you want to add your salon to a directory listing, or access the cloud. So on the left side, if I want to give a staff member permission, I'm going to go to Site Settings. And once we're in Site Settings, on the right side, this is where you have your additional features. So on the right side, we're going to go to Manage Users. And this shows me a list of people that currently have access. On the right side, I'm going to add a new user, a new staff member. And again, I have 2 options. Somebody that is not a point of sale employee, again, reserved for business partners that are not in your system, or the second option. And this is the one that most of you will use, somebody that is in your point of sale. So Shortcuts will ask you, for which location, which salon, spa, or barbershop would you like to give somebody access to? Now, for the case of Angel Salon, I actually have 2 locations. So I'm just going to go to the first one. And I'll show you in the event that you do have multiple locations, how to give a staff member permission at multiple sites. So I'll choose the first one, Angel's Test Salon. And Shortcuts will ask me, which staff member would I like to give permission to? So I'm going to say Gio. Gio should have access to look at his schedule or his appointments. So when I press continue, Shortcuts is going to ask me, what should the email be associated with Gio? So I'll say it's actually gio@shortcuts.net. And then at the bottom of the screen, again, what permissions should Gio have? If I want him to look at his appointments for the week, then I give him employee access. If he should also be able to make appointments for himself on his own appointment book, then he also gets appointment operator permission. And again, for most of the salons using shortcuts, those are the only two permissions they give the staff. Now, there are other settings here. So what does Site Manager Restricted mean? This is similar to setting Call Center Operator. What it does is it allows the staff to not only look at their own schedule, to look at their own appointment book, to make appointments for themselves, it allows them to make appointments for other staff members. Now, it's restricted from a regular site manager in the sense that a site manager, a full site manager, has the ability to look at surveys, to respond to customers, do things like that. So usually you don't give your staff that permission. If you have a receptionist that also cuts hair, then you might want to consider giving this person Site Manager Restricted access. The other permission, CIC access. What this stands for is Client Information Card access. So a staff member can actually use their phone or use their tablet to log into the console and bring up a customer's card. And this is their full client card, as in Shortcuts. So it'll have the customer's name, their contact details, their history notes, their formulas, things like that. So of course, not every salon wants to give staff that permission. So think about reserving this perhaps to just a receptionist or an assistant manager. The other nice thing about CIC access, though, is if your salon has custom forms, perhaps for any tattooing that you may do or any chemical or skin services that you may do and the customer has to sign off, you may want to give certain people CIC access so they can access the client form and help the customer fill it in. So I mentioned Site Manager allows the staff to have almost all the permissions for the console. The ability to look at surveys, the ability to respond to customers, the ability to even add other staff members into anywhere. So usually you do not want to mess with this. The same thing would apply to Company Manager on the top left. So this is the super user. This is usually what the owners have permission for. They can do absolutely everything. So that's Company Manager. But unless you actually have a business partner that's the company manager, you're never going to touch this. And I apologize for any background noise. That's actually my neighbor's car alarm. It sounds like somebody honking hysterical. So bear with me. Okay. So those are the settings. Now notice at the bottom. So Geo is the person that's selected. I gave him employee access. I gave him appointment operator access. If I had a second location, so my spa or my barbershop has a second location, at the bottom of the screen, I can press add sites and I can say, okay, Geo happens to work at both locations. He spends 3 days out of the week at one site and the rest of the time at the other site. So I'll choose Angels Test Salon, number 2, and I'll say for which employee is he going to have permission. Now, of course, if Geo's name was actually at the second site, he would be on this list. And I can say he has employee access and appointment operator access at the second location as well. Or maybe he only has employee access. So you can always add additional sites that they have permission to access. Now, if I hit the save button on the top right, then Geo's going to get an email with his username, with his password, and it will allow him to access anywhere, his schedule. So let's go back a screen to the site settings. So a moment ago, I mentioned client information card, online client information card. In the console, there is a CIC button, client information, and it looks like this group of people. So if you give the staff member permission, when they press client information, it will prompt them for the shortcut security pin. That's that 4-digit security pin that they should have to use the point of sale system. Same one. So let's say you want to give some staff members permission to access the client information, but perhaps not to be able to access it all the time. In site settings, you do have the ability to limit when they're allowed to access it. So if we scroll down on the site settings page, there are 3 options. Client information card access. So if you only want the staff to access it during your normal business hours, that's the first checkbox. Or if you want the staff to be able to access it at any time, that's the second checkbox. Now the third one, a little more useful. Sometimes your staff gets in there a little early, they're prepping their stations, they know they've got a lot of customers coming in, so they want to make sure they're ready. So you can say, I'm going to let my staff check the client information cards 30 minutes before or 30 minutes after the normal business hours. I can make it 60 minutes if I want. So in this case, it gives them a little bit of a cushion. So keep that in mind. If your salon allows certain people, receptionists, for example, to access the online client information card, when can they do that? So this will apply for everybody that has CIC access. So that is actually setting anywhere. Now, if I were to press anywhere, it's going to prompt me for a security pin for the shortcuts point of sale. So I don't want to bog down the system because I'm not actually at the salon. So I'm not going to do that. But for most everybody else, when you go to anywhere, you're looking at your schedule and you have the ability to jump between other staff members. So let's go back to the presentation. So once you set their level of permission, again, for the majority of sites, it's employee and appointment operator. If you have a receptionist, you may want to give them CIC access or site manager restricted so that they can look at other employee schedules. And that is actually anywhere in a nutshell. So we've learned how to add staff members to anywhere. We now know the different permission levels. And of course, since this is online, any device, mobile, phone that gets an internet connection, if you go to console.shortcutsoftware.com, you'll be able to access those appointment books. So that is anywhere. So we're going to open up the floor for questions. We, of course, always post our webinars in our library. We also have them on our YouTube channel. So if you go to Shortcuts USA, you can watch this classroom session a little later today, and you can watch recordings of every classroom session, every presentation, every new release, and every feature in Shortcuts. So let's open up the floor for questions. On the right side, if you're using the GoToWebinar tool, there should be a little question bar. So you can go ahead and type out your message. And I'll bring it up on my side in case you have any questions. And I'll give everybody just a moment. I don't think we have any questions for today. Well, if you're watching a copy of this recording a little bit later today, and you do have a question on anywhere, or you have a question on permissions, or you actually want to know, how do these permissions affect permissions that are in the cloud? Do let us know. So just so you know, when you give the staff member permission to access anywhere, by default, Shortcuts also gives them employee permission to access the cloud. And that is if your salon or your spa or your barbershop is using the cloud appointment book. So it will give them access to that. But if you want to restrict what permissions they have in the cloud, that's a completely separate set of permissions that are available through the cloud. So you may want to go back to one of our earlier classroom sessions to see how you can customize or how you can change the default cloud permissions. Okay, so If you have follow-up questions, again, you can reach us on social media, Shortcuts North America on Facebook, or you can send us an email, education@shortcuts.net, or give us a call. Thank you all for attending, and I look forward to seeing you on the next classroom session. Have a great day, everybody.